Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to My Leading Edge. This is actually our first version of this. We're going to shoot a lot of them. It's my wife, Camille Moss. She is the co-author of our new book, My Leading Edge. And tonight we have with us Steven and Erika Gendel. And our story with them, the reason they're on this first episode is they shared our experience. I don't know how many people were in a hospital room next door to each other for what, almost 2 months, like we were. Steven and Erika's son Joshua was born with cerebral palsy, and the same physician that operated on Mallory was taking care of Joshua. So we shared space together. We were in the hospital together on 9/11. Steven made a trip with me in the motorhome to go to a dump site. I mean, we just had this collective experience, and we want to talk about that tonight. Steven and Erika are of the Jewish faith. Camille and I are of the Christian faith, but we share a lot of similarities in terms of what we have gone through with our children. Just so you know, Joshua passed away 2 years ago, right?
3.5.
3.5, actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just time is so fleeting. And Joshua lived to be how old?
He was just short of 22.
22 years. So I want everybody to know that our son Jay went up to visit West Point, and Stephen picked him up at the airport. He wound up spending the night with Stephen and Erika up in New Jersey. They got him to West Point, got him home, and when Jay came home, now the last time he saw them, he was what, 3?
7.
7, sorry. See,
That,
time
yeah.
fleeting time. He was 7 years old, so he remembered them, and he remembered Joshua. But Jay's life was profoundly impacted by the time he spent with y'all, and I've told you that. But he came home talking about the love and the care that Joshua required, and everything you had to do to take care of him. So, would you tell everybody, Stephen, Eric, from your experience? What was your path like with Joshua? I know it was painful, and I know there were so many surgeries.
There were a lot of surgeries. Yes, there were.
Over 50 neurosurgeries.
And that's without 4 major GI surgeries,
Spine
4
surgery.
major orthopedic surgery, including that last spine surgery. That was a 10-hour
More
surgery for a very well-experienced surgeon.
Was Dr. Freed doing most of those?
The
No.
neuro, yes. He did most of the neuro, but the other ones,
orthopedic was
another guy named Dr. Feldman, who's amazing.
Yeah, and thank goodness that our community got us to him. And he was out at NYU until he moved to Florida, and we followed him to Florida because he was the doctor, he was the surgeon to take care of Joshua, no question.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like you traveled to see Dr. Freed, we traveled for this. I mean, luckily Freed was in our backyard,
right.
But Dr. Feldman was not, so we traveled. And
absolutely,
right, you don't
many trips, yeah,
right,
yeah.
You find the doctor that you believe is going to do everything in their power to heal your child, and
Yeah.
you go to that doctor.
you
right?
go to that doctor.
Without promising
whatever it takes.
Right.
Yeah,
Whatever
without the promise of miracles, right?
Yeah, without the promise of miracles, but
the prayer for miracles, but not the promise of miracles.
Right.
I think I believe that's another critical element of this journey that we both have had. We didn't get the cure that we wanted, that we prayed for. That old country song, "Thank God for Unanswered Prayers," comes to mind. Stephen and I talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and I'll just so the viewers understand, I sent Stephen a early version of the book to read because I really wanted to get his feedback because they lived this journey with us. And Camille and I wanted to tell it and tell it in a way where everybody that read it understood that it was written from my perspective primarily, but that I wanted my friends of the Jewish faith to know I'm not writing this book for any other reason than to tell my story. This isn't written to say you're wrong because you're of the Jewish faith, or you're wrong because of this, that, and the other. It's purely from my perspective. And Stephen read it and called me and said, "Well, what was your take on it?"
So it's funny. I answer that question. We always told people if we hadn't met you guys, we wouldn't have been able to go down the path of neurosurgery because watching what you did educated us on what was possible.
Hmm.
So like people always said like, why Dr. Freed? Why this? Why that? We're like, well, because we met the Moss family. We saw what the Mosses went through and it prepped us for what we would have to go through, not knowing that we would be prepping other people as we got to surgery number 48, 49, 50, on and on and on with Dr. Freed. So I want to start with that. Um, the book is insightful because it shows how you grounded your thoughts in faith and how that faith guided you through some of the most difficult decisions in your life that you'd have to make, that you thought you'd never have to make because no one ever thinks they have to make them.
And then you hope you never do.
Right.
We
We
certainly
pray
didn't
that
expect
nobody
it.
else ever has to.
Right. We don't want, right.
Right.
Oh, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And I told somebody the other day that, the ups and downs, the hills and the valleys were laced with dirty tricks. Every time we thought we had conquered this thing, we hadn't. And it got to the point where we were absolutely beaten down and were ready to give up and quit when Dr. Freed called us. That's in the book and the story in the book. But the first 4 chapters were all about me being able to understand what was required of me. I mean, every task, everything I did, it was here's the task standard requirement, and I could go out and prepare for it and do it. And God showed me that I could not fix this. And as men, we want to fix what's broken. And in this particular case, I couldn't. So we sought help everywhere we could relentlessly. And the final version of the book, frankly, a lot of the stuff hit the cutting room floor because it was just too much. Our final editor told us that people get the gist of it with 2 stories. They don't need 20. It's kind of like writing every story of every surgery Joshua had. He had 50 surgeries. Here's an example. That's what the editor came back to me with is 2 stories is enough and save the rest to just kind of talk it out. But one of the main things that I really wanted to talk to y'all about tonight that I try to bring out in the book was that feeling of anger toward God that really started consuming me at the lowest point. And Stephen was there, and I'd love to hear you tell the story of my hemorrhoid surgery. You were
No, you tell it
it's
way better.
because especially in the book.
I mean,
Yeah.
when you first told us that in person, we nearly peed our pants. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so sad that we were laughing so
So
hard,
hard,
but you
but-
must laugh
Yes.
at the crap that you go through. I mean,
You have to.
seriously, if you
Right.
don't laugh, you're going to bury yourself.
And it's funny because so I think back to there's 2 big big moments when I was reading the book. I thought back to June of 2002 about Josh's having a life-saving neurosurgery. I lose my job the next day while he's on life support. My mom tells us she needs emergency breast cancer surgery, and 2 weeks later, Erika's 2 grandparents and my grandmother are all in the hospital with heart failure. And I just remember driving that morning and looking up at the sky and saying, God,
What the heck?
what the heck? And if this is my test in life, I'm okay with a D grade as long as there's no F, because F means funeral. D's are okay because we're going to survive, but no F's. There's just going to be no F's of these 5 people that I'm caring so much about. So
Yeah.
there was that moment that I just always remember. I don't remember which hospital I was driving to, probably on my way to Hackensack to like relieve Erika from the overnight shift. And I just remember how intense that was because everything that could have gone wrong in a 2-week period was
Can.
was
It just can.
it just
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
And you don't think it
Well,
can
I
get
remember when
worse,
you got
yeah.
to the hospital that morning, and there was such a contrast because my employer was falling over to do everything they could to support us. And your employer said, hey, you haven't been to work for whatever length of
Yeah.
time, and,
You're done.
we don't care that your son is in this state. You're
Right.
fired.
Right.
And I remember that morning, but I've got to tell you how much I respect your resilience because from that, you bounced back and opened an incredible business in New Jersey. You're, at some point, and you know, shame on them. And look, that didn't just happen to you. It happened to some friends of ours that lived up there named the Esslingers. He went through the exact same thing, Stephen, where their son is in the hospital in paralysis, and they let him go. So he started his own company. He built it up and he sold it, and he's retired now. Probably Luke is probably 50 years old.
Right.
It's just the testimony that, you know, bad things happen to good people, and then good people bounce back, and they just keep
There's some
plodding
things that
away.
helped
But
us get through and be resilient. Some very specific things. Early on, we started saying, okay, things could always be worse. And then we added to it, you never know what or you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. And there was one more. Regardless of that, those three mantras kept us going, even when shit kept happening.
Yeah.
And I became more spiritual during those really dark times with Joshua, and pulled some things out of me that could help me get through. It wasn't the same for Steven, and he could not get that, but those dark times really made me more spiritual, and that's part of who I am right now. But we also realized that we will never say, God, you can't give me any more. There's nothing worse, because shit happens.
Stuff
It
coming.
just does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I talked to our pastor in Plains yesterday, and we were going through this, and I told him about that experience with my mom, which is in the book. I mean, for folks that haven't read it yet, I don't want to give it all away. But bottom line is, Mallory's. We've signed the paperwork for Dr. Freed to remove her left frontal lobe, and that very night, I started experiencing pain in the hospital. I don't remember if you were there or Erika with Joshua.
Erica was there.
I'm having to go down to the emergency room, and I wind up having to have emergency surgery.
In
And
the
I get
emergency
sent
room.
home with mom, and they load me up with OxyContin. And mom walks in, and I've left Camille and Mallory at the hospital, and she's having brain surgery in 2 days.
I just remember coming in the next morning and the nurse is saying, I'm so sorry about your husband. And I'm like,
What?
Yeah, she had no idea. And here I am getting cut, and the details aren't in the book, but for lack of, some of it's in there. But the bottom line is, you know, a doctor's down there got me jacked up in the air, taped wide open because he doesn't have an assistant, and then leaves me like that. And I feel so exposed, right? But at
So
the end of the
exposed.
day, I felt real exposed. He sends
With a
me
breeze.
home. Yeah, he sends me home on OxyContin. And then my mother, God love her, walks in the bedroom and tells me that God's not going to put any more on my plate than I can handle. And I went into army mode with language on her, which she burst into tears,
What words
leaves the
are
room.
those?
Oh yeah, I feel bad. I feel really bad about it. But it all kind of started just coming together. 2 days later, I get back to the hospital. Mallory's having her surgery the next day, and I can't sleep, so I go to the chapel. And I'm in the chapel at 2:33 in the morning, and the chaplain that was serving both of our families, Chaplain Jim, walks in, and he asked me a pivotal question. He said, how are you dealing with your anger toward God? After he said, I thought I'd find you here. And I'm like, seriously? It's 2:30 in the morning. Why are you here? He said, how are you dealing with your anger toward God? And I just burst into tears because I had been holding that inside. And when I sent Stephen the book to read, I was curious. I said, were you angry? And he told me,
Yeah, plenty of times. Plenty of times. And in fact, think back to it's fall of 2016 for us. It was a 4-month hospital stay, and I bent over in the hospital, slide Josh up the bed, reherniated my disc, ruptured my disc, and now and we had just gotten the puppy home, not our older dog home, and now all of a sudden I go home, I have to crawl, I can't even walk. Erica goes back to be with Josh, and then I go to the hospital the next day. They say it's just back pain. They send me home. And the next day I go to a pain management doctor, and I collapse in his office, which is across the street from Hackensack. And at the same time, the surgeon who did the prior surgery said, "You need surgery right now." I said, "I know, I can't walk." And they sent an ambulance across the parking lot to take me into the emergency room. And then I had to wait a week at the other end of the hospital in a room while Erica is in the children's hospital running back and forth.
And I couldn't get through the doors. I had to borrow nurses' badges, or else I'd have to go outside and around the building through the main entrance to go see him, when I'm the one on Josh 24/7.
7.
Yeah.
I tell you, those were some hard days.
Because I got out of there a week later, and then Josh had a major neurosurgery coming up, and I wasn't there. It was the first one I missed. And boy, that was tough.
They were very hard.
And
That
did
was
you
tough.
curse your mother out, or did you just kind of let it go?
Yeah, and I was mad. I was screaming at God at home, laying here, just doing my best to not.
He wasn't doing well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had to learn to walk again. I remember coming to the hospital and walking very slowly, but boy, I was going to come to the hospital to see them. But yeah, we learned how to laugh about it later. In the moment, I was pretty pissed at a lot of people in my faith. Like, not why me. It wasn't a why me moment. It's just, how
Right.
can Joshua handle so much, and how does Erica have to do this alone?
Yeah.
I think
That's where
that-
my brain went. It wasn't why me. It's we're a support for each other, just like you
Yeah.
guys are a support for each other. How does this have to happen at a critical moment?
And I think part of it is our journeys were long. Our journey was from when Josh was born as a micro preemie. Your journey was long.
It
And
wasn't, and I always felt like a dirty trick. I didn't know which was worse, because Mallory was perfectly normal and frankly better than normal for her first 5.5, almost 6
Mhm.
years, and it just happened.
yeah,
And I felt like we got robbed. And I've often, not that I think it could have been any better, but had we come from the start like that, I think the anvil drop there is probably no different than the anvil drop that happened to us, you
and
know?
I think it's a credit to your strength that you can say, I felt robbed. And it's a credit that you were able to hear Pastor Jim say, are you mad at God? And you acknowledged it.
Mhm.
Because Stephen now is saying that with caring for his mother. And it's okay. And he feels guilty. I know he feels
Yeah.
guilty for saying it. And there's no guilt. It's real.
Yeah.
I-
Completely real.
I don't know if y'all went through this, and I'm really curious to hear what your rabbi told you when you sat down and talked to him, but something that we struggled with to try to understand the why just kind of kept coming at us. And retrospective analysis is really beneficial in that after we'd gotten home the second time after the next major brain surgery, I started noticing people around us that were going through struggles. And we suddenly became advisors and, shoulders to cry on, because people understood that we knew what they were dealing with, and they still do.
Perspective.
Mhm.
It was
So,
perspective. You got perspective that you don't want
yeah,
anybody else to have.
we got perspective through our experience, and then suddenly not only became the expert, but the shoulder to cry on and the empathy, the person to empathize. But I kept saying, why, God, why? Why did this happen? And then when we dealt with the DMV with Mallory's special, her parking permit, I think that was when the anvil dropped on my head. When that person at DMV said, "Why don't you do something about it?" That was one episode. The other episode's when the superintendent of schools dared me to do some things, and I literally looked at her and I said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you obviously don't know who you're messing with. I mean, you're calling out the wrong guy." Because look, that little experience I had in Saudi Arabia, I write about it in the book, with that little redheaded major. I
Yep.
was a young lieutenant. Well, I was a first lieutenant, but regardless, I was being conditioned that whole time to fight for Mallory. And I thought I was being trained to fight the Iraqis at the time. I didn't know the battle was going to be at home, and y'all had fought battles. But tell me, see, when you sat down with the rabbis, I'm really curious, from the Old Testament, did they reference Old Testament literature? What was?
No, it's
Tell me.
funny. I mean, I think back to one of our rabbis. He was really good at calling us on a Saturday night and saying, "What are you guys doing? I'm coming by. And he'd be
At
show
the hospital.
at the hospital. He's like, I'm coming by. We're like, okay, Saturday nights are pretty quiet. And there was a bottle of gin and some little cups. And it was just sit back and take the stress away.
Tanqueray and paper
and
cups.
And we would just
Paper
sit back
cups.
and Tanqueray, and Josh would
With our
laugh.
rabbi.
With our rabbi, and Josh would laugh. And we'd ask him questions. He wouldn't quote Old Testament with us. He would be more along the lines of, so back to one of your earlier questions. So there's, the different, what we call branches of Judaism: Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. I'll let Erika describe the three, because she'll do it better than I can. And who would quote versus
Our Orthodox rabbis would definitely be
Quoting
quoting
scripture.
scriptures and stuff. And
Orthodox is what to you? Like the
Orthodox is like super Jews, heavy names.
the most religious of our group.
The most
Okay.
observant to the letter of what's in the Torah, the Bible.
Okay.
Right.
And Reform Jews, we're looking at modern life in perspective of the Torah.
Mhm.
And then conservative Jews are a little bit in between. And there's different levels of everything. And we're very traditional in
Mhm.
that we're kind of reform and conservative.
Right.
But we're open to hearing it all.
So our Orthodox rabbis would be like, "Oh, you've got to read this," or so there's this.
I have a bunch of the books
The-
from that rabbi.
There's a thing called wrapping tefillin, which is a special prayer you say. Supposed to say it daily, and certain
Miracles will come
will
from it.
come from it. So like if
Keeping God at the forefront of your
Forefront.
mind
So
and
if-
over your heart.
So if
yeah.
I was frustrated, Rabbi Zalman would pull out the tefillin and say, "We're wrapping tefillin right now," right? Just to remind me that God was here and here. Whereas our other rabbis would not. They would just talk to us and just let us vent in the moment.
And then they'd say a prayer for healing
Healing.
for sure.
Yeah.
However, recognizing that this sucks and that, yes, we can keep laughing.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, like, most people don't know this, the different, Reform, Orthodox, conservative groups, they're only like 100 to 150 years old. They're not that. Everyone back in the day was Orthodox.
They were just
Everyone.
Jewish.
Right.
That all started as society changed, especially in the United States. That,
Maybe 200 years.
but when a lot of Jews from Germany who came over before World War II and during World War II were assimilated in German society and brought that reform movement to the United States, and then that's how it picked up.
The assimilation part.
The assimilation part to be. My father always talked about going to services in the 40s and 50s
A temple.
at Temple, and the first thing they sang was "God Bless America." That was it. Yes.
Well, I found it interesting that you said he brought by a bottle and, it was poured. My favorite Methodist pastor is a guy named Rick Lanford. And I love Rick. They call him Daddy Rick. He ran the Methodist Children's Home in Macon, Georgia. And he wasn't my personal pastor, but he was our friends. In fact, his wife was a pharmacist with Camille. In the middle of all this stuff going down, he just showed up at my house one day in his pickup truck, and he had a cooler in the back, and he dropped the tailgate, said, "Come here." And he opened up the cooler and he had cold beer. And Rick sat there and popped the top on a cold beer with me, and he just talked.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know, it was real. You know what I mean? It was connected. And the thing that I found about Chaplain Jim, I wish I could remember his name. Y'all probably do, his whole name. He was phenomenal. He connected with people. I was trying to learn to teach myself to play the guitar because I had nothing to do but sit in the room and watch Mallory on the EEG all day. That was unsuccessful. Yeah, that didn't work either. And it still hasn't worked. I've still got the same guitar.
Your point of pastoral care and the value of it. It can come from many different perspectives and many different faiths. As long as it's a good communication and a really solid listening, pastoral care has a good place. So that's why for us, it doesn't have to be just a rabbi or a cantor or our clergy. It can be Pastor Jim or
Right.
anybody else
Who wanted to come in.
Yeah, and not try to convince us to convert.
But just talk to us.
We've had that. Don't
Which-
think we
yeah.
haven't.
We've had it in our own home.
I think I'm glad you said that, because
Yeah.
in all the years you've known me, how many times have I said, hey, you should become a Christian?
Never, never,
It's
never.
not,
We
I
just
don't
know
think
good people
it's-
when we see them.
Right.
I know.
You-
Well,
you-
you know, the
We do
funny,
too.
the funny thing is Camille being from Cairo, Georgia, which is a metropolis compared to Plains. I'm my first person of the Jewish faith in Atlanta in my late 20s, I think. There are no Jewish people in Sumter County, at least Plains, Georgia, during my time. I don't know that there are any there now. So I was
I bet there
completely,
are.
yeah, I didn't know anything about Judaism, and I never said, but we had some friends that invited us to their home for Hanukkah, and you know, and just started teaching us stuff we didn't know. And I worked with some folks at the Pfizer Learning Center that were of the Jewish faith, and they started telling us things that we didn't know. But you know, I always tell people my Savior's a Jewish carpenter, and it's the truth. But I think
Except that your family's last name is Goldman, and so we know there's someone in
There's
there.
somebody in there.
There's
That's,
someone
no, we
in
married
there.
we married into the Goldmans, but yeah,
You married
it's
into it, but there's
possible.
someone on that side, so they didn't know that there's someone there that changed at some point. But even though
Well,
you married in, there's someone there who,
Yeah.
whether they changed their religion for whatever
Now,
reason,
mind you, we didn't grow up in Jewish areas either.
right?
Really?
Oh, yeah,
That's
we were
interesting.
minorities.
We were minorities in our towns, that in areas that have,
I mean,
several
our
cities.
current town, it's a very, it's much more Jewish.
But we didn't grow up that way. Our
No.
towns had nothing. I was
No.
one of the only Jewish kids in my whole community. Erika was one of the only Jewish children in her community. There was maybe 5 of us in my whole high school.
There were about 5 or 6 of us in my
But
high school when I was there.
if I had gone to the 2 towns next to us, there was definitely more.
Mhm.
But now we live in a town that's different. I would say it's 20% in the town we live in now.
It's changed.
Cha-
The demographics
is
of
it
our
changed?
community are very much changing right now. So I couldn't even say right now, but
Right. So it was interesting because we didn't grow up in communities which are 15 minutes from us right now that had a heavy,
it is a
Jewish
community with
population.
3 synagogues
right,
and a mikveh.
right.
I think
So-
the common thread, you know, which with my friend Rick and with Chaplain Jim, is the ability to connect and understand
Mhm.
and listen and not judge.
To be real.
And to be real. And I mean, when he cracked that
Oh,
beer
thank you.
open and handed it to me, he said, brother, just talk to me. What's going on in that head? What's going on in your heart? Let's just chat. And
Yeah.
it was
The
an
authentic
unburden.
connection.
Oh yeah, I just felt like this relief because of the guilt. And let's talk about the guilt. Where's the guilt stem from?
I
It
still have
stems-
some.
Yeah, and it stems from being raised in a home where your parents set this unbelievable example of what good looks like, and you feel like you're not only failing them, you're failing God, you're failing your family, you can't fix this,
Yep.
and it's all coming down on you. And I never even told Camille how I was feeling. And when he said that to me in the chapel that morning, I thought he had tapped into my soul somehow because I had not revealed it all. And I'm pretty good at hiding that kind of stuff. I can fake happy. I mean, I did it all the time in my career with mean people. I'd go in and act like I was so happy to see them. And I tell people when I'm training them, you know, you're out in the drive, out in the street, trying to force your car to turn into that parking lot, right? And you know you've got to do it, and it's miserable. But people that have not gone through what we have collectively gone through, and I know our heart breaks for y'all, because we know that if you could still have Joshua, you would, and you would want him despite,
As long as he wasn't suffering. As
yeah,
long as he wasn't suffering. Because there
Yeah.
were some days he told us that the pain was so excruciating. I mean, look at it this way. From what we've learned, one neurosurgery takes a person about a full year to recover from.
Mhm.
Knowing he had over 50, he never recovered. His body never had a chance when we started doing neurosurgeries at 3 years old to fully recover with over 50 in 22 years. Like
We
that.
had-
I will always remember his smile. You know,
He did have that smile.
So I'll tell you
Yeah.
guys like a funny, we talk
So-
about laughter, and I'll tell you a funny Dr. Freed story real quick. So one of the things Erica and I always did was alternate who goes in the operating room, right? Her turn, my turn, her turn, my turn. So we're going in the operating room, and Josh starts screaming because he doesn't want to be there.
Man, when they took the brakes off the bed and
He
started
knew,
wheeling him in.
and I'm trying to calm him down, and we have a new anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist is hopping around and doing stuff. He's trying to calm me down. And I get this game face on before Josh goes in the OR. This is the moment, you know, to have my game face on. And I'm focused on Josh. And I said, Dr. Cohen, who's the anesthesiologist, I go, this is a no-brainer. And everyone starts laughing because we're about to have neurosurgery. And I just go, Dr. Cohen, it's a no-brainer. And everyone's laughing. You know, they've got the mask on and we see them laughing. And he looks at me and he goes, you cannot be that calm before your child has neurosurgery. This is all, Josh is still screaming everything. And Dr. Freed's in the corner and he says, Dr. Cohen, Mr. Gendel's been in this operating room more times than you have. Put his son out. He's okay. And because I was just,
Yep.
and Dr. Fee was looking at scans like game face. And I'm just like focused on Josh. It was hysterical. He always remembered that story. And he's like, I just thought you were so calm. I'm like, no, I just have a routine of what I need to do to get my son through this. And then I have to prep myself for post.
Yeah.
And there's no control in the middle, right?
Camille coaches me on that. I can hardly talk about this stuff without getting emotional. I don't know that I'll ever be able. Oh, she told me that, it's in the book too, that I had to go say bye to she and Mallory in the hospital when Mallory's born because I had to lead soldiers onto a 747 to go to war. And I was dying with my mom in a restaurant, crying like a 3-year-old. And mom's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm like, I'm knowing I've got to go say bye to Camille and Mallory tonight in the hospital because if I do it in the morning, I'm going to be a basket case, and I don't want my troops to see me that way. You know, I'm supposed to be the strong leader leading them to war. I can't do it. So Camille tells me before I get up to talk about this is to think about that lieutenant that was leading people on the plane. It doesn't work, but she tries. I try. But it's everybody jokes about Jeff. They go, it's not a question of will he get emotional and cry. It's how long will it take him? How long will it take him? And it used to embarrass me, but my man, the center for the Philadelphia Eagles that retired last year and boo-hooed through his whole deal, he flat out said, I'm not embarrassed by this at all. This meant something to me. So that hearing him say that helped me a lot. But if there, as you obviously read the book, and again, you read the unedited, a lot of that stuff hit the cutting room floor because it was just a lot. Did it take you back? I mean, how did you connect?
Oh, yeah. Sure. Because, listen, we always have talked about like the different stages of our life, right? There's we're dating part stories of what we did before Josh was born. There was Erica having a really challenging pregnancy, and then there was Josh forward, right?
Yeah.
And what those 22 intense years looked like. And as I speak to my coach about it all the time, he talks about post-traumatic stress disorder because he was in the military as well in Vietnam. And he was in the Marines, and he talked about losing men in Vietnam and how he was able to learn, obviously, how to have breaks from that, and how we went 22 years and never always lived in an emergency room without a mental break. Even when we were off, we were on. Because you always had to have an ear open, you always had to have an eye open, even at home, for something that might happen. So that intensity and the exhaustion that comes with that after 22 years that we're just kind of at different times expressing now over the past 3 years is just interesting for both of us because we were always on.
We're still tired.
And we're still tired.
Not just from grief.
And not,
but the PTSD is real. The trauma.
Oh, it's for sure.
So real.
Yeah.
It is real.
It's
certain things, certain situations, certain things we hear about, it's like deep breath.
Right. Or someone comes to us because, as you said before, Jeff, like they know we can handle it, right? They come to Erica, Camille, because they know she can handle it. And sometimes we want to shake some people and be like, you're really screwing up here, but hey, you're doing great, right? And other times we're like, okay, this is what you really need and we can help you because we've been to a place no one ever wants to think about it as, you know, Erika was the one who educated me early on that we were going to outlive our child. That's not a normal way to think. So then every day has to matter, but you can't act like every day is the last one, but every day has to count. So how do you live that life, right?
Yeah. That balance.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, I mean,
Camille can talk about it probably better than I can. We had those battles too, because people would say like, do you stand over Mallory while she's taking a bath? And for a long time we did, because we were worried she was going to have a seizure and drown. And then we had to come to terms with the fact that we couldn't be there every split second. And frankly, most epileptics suffocate in their sleep in a pillow, truth be told. We're going to stand there and watch her sleep all night, or we're going to have alarms. We're going to do all this stuff. From our side of the coin with the Christian faith, our belief is that when you pass away and you go be with Jesus, you go in a perfect form. You are healed. You are perfect. Your body's perfect. So we had to come to terms with, how did you say it? That she'll be whole with Jesus?
Well, she'll be healed instantly.
That's, from our perspective as Christians, that's what we cling to and we hang on to, and our belief is that's what's going to happen, and that's for everybody. So when Jesus is ready for her, he's going to call her home, no matter what the circumstances are, whether we were there, whether we weren't. But we talked today, and you're talking about PTSD. We're never going to not have that, because when Jay's in the cast, I don't know that y'all saw him when he was in his cast, but Mallory was having 4 different kinds of seizures, and one of them was called tonic, and the hands go up and the head thrusts forward like somebody has you by the back of the head and does this. And inevitably, it would always happen when she was in proximity to something that would hurt her. A bathroom sink, a table.
Yes.
I don't care. I'd get her up and have her ready to go to school and dressed, and she'd face plant in her cereal bowl. It was inevitable. The other one was the atonic drop attack. So when you just go completely limp and the head's the heaviest part of the body, you're falling on your head. We'd be in the mall, walking, holding her hand, and sneeze. And we may have had packages under this hand. We'd let go of her hand to cover our face to sneeze. Boom.
Yep.
And then get up with a big contusion, a big swollen bump on her head. And Camille and I felt like we couldn't leave the house because we looked like abusive parents.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, with Jay on crutches.
We were a picture for sure.
I'm
Jay's
sure.
on
Yeah, Jay's on crutches, right?
Yeah, Jay's on crutches with a broken leg. Mallory's all beat up. And I think what really drove the story home, we go to the mall and we're in the food court and we bought lunch and we bought 2 bags of food, and Mallory's sitting there and we're going to split it all up. And before we could get it out, Mallory starts wailing and crying and screaming, "You didn't get me anything to eat. You're not going to feed me." She's all beat up, and Camille and I are panicking. No. Here, this is your food. We're going to split it. But I mean, we went through that routinely. But
yeah,
I talked about earlier, Steven, about dirty tricks, feeling like we had gotten, robbed. I literally would see folks like you with your child in a wheelchair, and my heart would break 100%. I never did not notice that, and my heart didn't break when I saw it. But I got to tell you, for 6 years, 5.5, almost 6 years, neither one of us ever saw ourselves behind a wheelchair. Never imagined it, didn't think about it. And then we found ourselves there. That is the feeling of being robbed. And then I'll tell you, though, through God's divine providence, the way my head works, Mallory gets sick when Jay's 2. She gets sick 2 years, 3 years earlier, he wouldn't be here. I can't imagine that we would have tried to have another child had Mallory been sick from the onset, and look what we would have missed out on with that kid. Y'all know him.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't know.
No. So God's smarter than all of us, obviously. But look, We've enjoyed talking to y'all. I mean, I just want to see if there's anything else that the two of you want to share with
We're
folks.
grateful for Joshua, and I'll tell you why. We're grateful for Joshua because he allowed us to meet each other, and we so cherish that relationship, even though we don't see each other and we don't talk all the time. But I appreciate that Joshua introduced us to some amazing people, you being
mean,
among them.
Like
Yeah.
Jeff, when I had to call you and tell you, where things were going and that phone call, and I heard your voice crack, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm making this call. Like when we had to start hospice, I was like, I can't believe I'm making this call. Certain people, our journey, Eric always talked before Josh was born. I was saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And she would always say, if he's healthy, if he's healthy,
If
if
our
he's
child's
healthy, if our
healthy,
child's healthy. And as obviously we went down our path and he had some challenges, many challenges
one or two.
too. We learned about the beauty of the world and the horror of the world. And Joshua didn't think that anything was quote unquote, he was okay with the wheelchair. He was okay being who
I asked him
he
if
was.
when he dreamed about himself, was he still using his wheelchair? Yeah.
Yeah. And I asked him
He
one
was.
time, he was a bunch of kids playing outside, and I wheeled him to the window, and I asked him if he was upset that he wasn't outside running around in the grass, and he said no. And after like 20 minutes of questions, he was able to tell me he just wished the whole world was paved. And that just was like this amazing perspective from my
Yeah.
child that was like 10 or 11 at the time. It wasn't that he could run around the grass. He was okay in the wheelchair as long as the whole world was paved.
Was paved.
Right. So it
Yeah.
was this moment of like, okay, sorry to make you cry, Jeff, of
It's perspective.
right,
I mean,
perspective. So the perspective of the people we were able to meet during this process has been a beautiful part of our life that
Mhm.
I don't think God or ourselves would want it any other way.
It's just our journey.
And it's our journey.
Man plans.
And God laughs.
God laughs.
Right. And it's just
Yeah.
part of
Absolutely.
part of the process. Yeah.
I was going to tell you one other thing, which is Old Testament, that I thought was very interesting. I can't tell you. Well, in fact, another person, Peyton DeHart, that wrote a review of the book, he was another one that read kind of the last before the last version to, I wanted to make sure I didn't even want to go to print with this thing if it wasn't readable and if it wasn't of value to somebody. I wrote it, and I think it's important people know this. The folks that cleaned this thing up, basically, it was an every morning hour and a half of me throwing up through a computer and hitting a dash button every time I had a change of thought. And Ronnie Burnish, the first person that started working on it, she called me after a couple of days and said, please put a piece of tape over the dash button on your keyboard. And I said, Ronnie, I was just getting everything out, and that's part of that therapy, that PTSD we're talking about, of having gone through all this trauma and realizing it's not, you haven't gotten rid of it. It's going to be there. And I'm just writing. But Peyton read the book and he read all the Bible verses that are in there. There's Old Testament, New Testament Bible verses that during my flight of life, our flight of life, that we would go, okay, we need to focus on this. And here's this verse that just is telling, that's giving us the guidance that we need to follow.
Yeah.
Peyton said, I'm shocked. I didn't see anything from Job, the book of Job. And I said, it's interesting you say that because you're one of a million people that say, you're a modern day Job. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And let me tell you how I know I'm not, because every time I started feeling sorry for myself, God put somebody in my path that had it so much worse for me than me. And I will never forget wandering around the hospital when we were all in Hackensack, feeling sorry for myself. So I'm just going to go walk it off, right? I wound up on the cancer floor and I looked into the faces of all those parents, including Dr. Freed had been through it with his own son with leukemia. I looked into their eyes and I saw people that were hanging on by a thread, hoping their child would survive the chemo or whatever therapy they were going for. And then I'd feel like I don't have it so bad. I don't have it so bad. And frankly, with y'all, with Joshua going through what he was, I'm like, all I got to do, I mean, Mallory's sitting here coloring and talking and just being Mallory, and there's poor Joshua, and the Gendels have got to care for him. I was never Joe. I'm sure you guys didn't feel that way either, but I'm curious how
No.
you
When
process
people
that.
said that to us, I mean, people definitely said how strong we are, and wow, you are just amazing. And they said it to me a lot. Did they say it to you?
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm mom, and I'm doing what I can for my beautiful boy. And I just reminded people, no, I'm mom, and I love what I do. I love on my
And
boy.
we'd also say, every day's a gift. You never know what
That's it.
tomorrow's.
Every day is a gift.
And she would say, every day's a gift. You never know
what
what tomorrow's going to bring, and things can always be worse.
That's the 3.
And people would say to us, what do you mean things could be worse? Like, you guys have it pretty bad. And we're like, Erika had a mindset that Joshua's room in the ICU was going to be the good mojo. We were just going to have good energy, and the nurses would get free hugs before their shift, and it was just going to be the best
Always
mojo
good music.
possible.
Mhm.
Because we always felt someone had it worse than us. Like, yes, we're in a hospital, but we have a house to live in. Yes, we have food on the table. Yeah, yes. And you'd be looking at this saying, no one wants to face the fears you faced, the fears we faced.
No.
But we kept those mantras going. And what was the one, the prayer you said every morning with Josh?
I would say a prayer every morning with Josh, Moda Ani, and it means thank you, God, for this new day that I'm here. And I still say it actually most days. And Joshua and I really became appreciative of every day.
Thank you for this day, Moda Ani.
And we'd even say it end of the
That's
day. We'd say
beautiful.
middle of the day if we needed it. And just,
Yeah.
we're here. We're here. There's a
Thank
purpose.
you, God. And thank you, God. Yeah.
Thank you, God.
For
We
this
are
day.
here.
For this day.
Mhm.
Just for this
In the
moment.
Christian vows, the marriage vows, I don't know if it's similar in the Jewish vows, but in the Christian vows is for, love, honor, and cherish till death do us part, in
Mhm.
sickness and in health, right? And Camille commented that we never dreamed that sickness meant our child's. In
There's no
the
planning this.
Jewish, is there something similar in the Jewish vows and sickness
About
and in health to
Yeah,
love?
similar. I mean, the interesting thing, in Judaism, there's a thing called a ketubah, which is a Jewish marriage contract, which you actually sign before you actually do the ceremony.
And that's really the whole marriage.
The whole
pretty
marriage is
much.
actually the contract
The
that you
contract,
sign.
An
That's
actual contract.
that's hanging on our wall in our bedroom. And it really says
It's about that,
it's
and
about
having
that.
a warm home of faith and learning and care
Listening.
and listening,
and understanding.
just all encompassing.
Right. And it's in
Well, I'm
Hebrew
going
and
to
in
be
English.
curious how you take what you had to say about this, because we're still married. You're still married. We fought through this thing. And there's one part of the book that I got pretty stern. There's lessons learned all through it. And you may or may not recall the lesson learned about what it means to be a man in a marriage and in a home, because I know far too many men that have run for the hills and ditched the sick kid on their wife, and then set up housekeeping with somebody else and acted like they didn't have any accountability. So I hit on that pretty hard about the vows, and it's a commitment. It's not a think about. It says a lot of things, and you did this in front of God and this company, whether you're Jewish or Christian, doesn't matter. You said you would do certain things, and when the road got rough, you took off. So I'm trying to get men, especially if somebody reads this that hadn't gotten married, that is thinking about it. If they read my book, I'm hoping they're sitting there going, "Man, this is really something I need to give some serious consideration to," because it's not all roses and smooth highways. But I wanted to get that out there, and in my business now as building leaders is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get in their heads as young men and go, let's talk about what it means to really be a man. And you better be ready for everything not to be smooth and glorious all the time. You're going to have some rough times. This is called the human experience. Are you going to stand up and stand tall in the moment your family needs you? Or are you going to tuck tail and run? Because mamas typically are not going to tuck tail and run on their kids.
No.
It's the men. So what's your thought on that?
We know that the divorce rate among among couples who have a child with disabilities is extraordinarily high, way higher, exponentially higher
Than the national average.
typical
Yeah.
population.
Yep.
We know from our experience that we
fit.
had our stuff early in our marriage,
Fit.
and it really taught us how to communicate, and it taught us the keys to just being married. And we're losing our dogs here. They're about to like fall out.
No.
But
Water over there?
no, there's no water over there. And we just know that we've made a commitment to each other and to our family, and we know what's important to us. We talked seriously about our values before we got married, so we knew we were all in.
And my dad used to ask me, like, are you okay? Are you guys okay? Like, he used to always say, like, are you guys okay? And I'm like, yeah, why? He's like, Steven, you're facing the impossible. Like, he always said Josh was 4 kids in one, because he said, I worked really hard with you and your brother. You're working twice as hard as I did with one. So he's 4. He's like, how are you guys doing this? How are you able to communicate? How are you able to laugh? How are you able to do this? And I said, we're doing it because we want to be together, and we chose to be together. So because we chose to be together to like raise this child, then this is the path we're going to take. And you know, Erika had after Josh was born, I mean, she had 2 pregnancies that she lost.
Mhm.
And so we
never expected to have just one child.
And so once after the second one, we asked Josh if should we try again, and he said no. He said he didn't like to see mommy so sick.
I was sick.
And in bed.
Don't make me do that again. Oh wait, those days are gone. But
so for us, it was clearly just we wanted to be the best parents we could be, and we didn't put a qualifier of only a healthy child.
nope.
We never put a qualifier. So
I
that
think
was the big-
somebody told us one time that God chooses parents of special needs kids, and I'm like, well, aren't we lucky? And,
Yeah,
and
what
I was
man's
being
not lucky?
sarcastic. Yeah, I mean, really. So he picked
Yeah.
us. I mean, I again, just it was a sarcastic. What I talked to my pastor about yesterday. Camille about died the other day, Stephen. I told her I'm already conjuring up the next book in my head on leadership and servant
Wow.
leadership. And she says, good Lord, please take a break. And I said, no, I said, this is going to make me dig into some things that I need to get smarter on. But anyway, I was telling the pastor that people need to be taught what to say and not to say to people. Because I said, and he said, well, give me an example. And I said that about my mom.
I got the book
I
started
said,
on that one.
oh yeah, I mean, we could write a book. We should probably collaborate.
Yeah.
dumb things people say to us.
What do parents of special needs kids not want to hear from you while you're bebopping around with no challenges apparently
Yeah.
in your life?
Oh, so
I
many.
mean,
God only give you what you can handle. I love that one.
People would say that to me, and I never wanted to just shit all over them the way I felt. I would say, huh, that's interesting. I don't subscribe to that.
So that's Erika's answer. My answer is always, so then describe the Holocaust to me.
mhm.
So God determined that all those people in the Holocaust should die. Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page and that they can handle it. Really?
And I even have a very good friend who means well. However, she did say to me a number of times, you deserve a typical child. You deserve to have a typical child. And I'm like, huh? Where's that coming
What does
from?
that even mean?
He
A
said,
normal
I
child?
deserved my typical child, so I had the second child, who happens to have more issues than
The first child.
But I said, I deserve nothing. I deserve to be a really good mom, to be to this beautiful kid that I have now, and
Yeah.
to be the best wife I can be. And I said, I don't deserve anything. My deserve level is low because I know I can do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't know that I wrote a little bit of that in one section of the book, but I don't think it made the final version. But I told the pastor yesterday that I'd stumbled across a funeral home site that actually had a thing you could click on that basically said what people don't want to hear at a funeral.
Oh, I got
And
those.
yeah,
I got
pretty
those.
much show up.
That's a website you saw?
It was a funeral home. And in the funeral home, you know, somebody's obituary had posted, and on that funeral home's website, I do recall it was in Macon, Georgia, you could click on an advisory like thing that said what not to say to somebody at a funeral.
Oh.
Like
That's the
they're in
best.
a
I need
better
to see
place.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
send that link over.
Send that link if you can remember it, because man, the rabbi and I laughed at some of the crap that came out of people's mouths. And I'd be like, huh, how about that? Thank goodness for Lexapro.
You know, he was, I told him, I said, you should put together a sermon on it. And I said, pull up everything you've ever heard somebody say to somebody that's suffering from a death, and start writing this stuff down,
Yes.
and then preach a sermon on it, because people need to be trained on it, because their heart's in the right place, but their mouth is somewhere
So
else.
you know, I'm just a Jersey girl, and sometimes what comes out of my mouth isn't perfectly neat and tidy. So a lot of people, I don't know why they felt that it was okay to do this, but they'd ask me, "Oh, so what are you doing with your time now? How are you using your time?" And I finally got so sick and tired of it. I said, "Pole dancing." And then if they really went further with it, because they're that clueless, I'd say, "Yeah, I put a pole in Josh's room."
Yeah, I mean, we just like,
Oh my gosh.
Do you get it, person?
Yeah,
I,
Yeah.
you know, you kind of sit there, well, what would you be doing?
yeah,
Oh,
what should I
what
be
should
doing?
I be doing? What
what
are
should
you?
we
I
doing?
don't know.
Right.
We
Yeah.
we went through it. We went through a lot of that,
Yeah.
and we still do every now and then. And I think it just kind of falls short on us that people don't realize what it means that we will never be empty nesters.
Right.
We don't know what it's like to be that couple that's now in their 60s that just up and decides they want to go do something.
Mhm.
We have three of us, and we have to plan accordingly, and we have
Right.
to make different decisions. And guess what? We're not the only ones. Right here in this subdivision we live in is a special friends club, and there are about 17 families with adult special needs children in our neighborhood.
In our neighborhood.
Wow.
And we, again, Mallory's probably one of the more functional children in, or adults in this group. A lot of them are wheelchair bound, and they have various issues from Down syndrome to you name it. But every family story is different and unique. And I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, when I sat down and did this, and Camille and I were wrestling about finishing it and getting it out, I said there are people that need to read this, and if they get one thing out of this book, is
Mhm.
talk to somebody, get it out, don't hold it down, and think you're unique and the only one that's ever felt this way. And I'm so thankful that y'all were willing to come on this video with us and tell your story. And I'm hoping we're going to get a lot of folks. I'm actually going to interview some pastors, and we're going to talk about this stuff. You know, what is the operative thing that can help somebody get through this, because we don't want them to choose the wrong path, but we want them to talk it out. It's depressing, it's tough, and it's probably the biggest challenge I ever faced in my life.
But I just want to say that, like your beautiful prayer that you said every morning with Joshua, I say a similar prayer. And I'm, we've learned to be grateful for just every day and to be thankful for that. And even through the hard times, even through the bad times, God is still so good, and there's so much goodness, and so many blessings in these children that God gave us. And I'm just very, very thankful, and
Lot of
thankful that He
gratitude.
brought us together with you
course.
guys.
Absolutely.
That's the best. That is the
Yeah.
best part.
Thank
The
you.
book is The Leading Edge. It's available on Amazon. Camille and I are not writing this and selling it to get rich. We are donating a big chunk of the proceeds from the book to the Make-A-Wish Foundation and to Camp Blue Skies, which is a camp for special needs adults. We didn't write this book to get rich. We wrote this book to try to help folks. So if you're struggling and you want to read about our story, you've heard the Gendel stories, they shared it with us. Go on Amazon, get the book, and when you're done reading it, please hand it to somebody you think needs it, and let them read it. But we still don't have it all figured out, but we sure try.
Well done.
We
Awesome,
appreciate
guys.
you guys being on with us.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Great to
Thank
see
you.
you. Good luck with the puppy.